In the world of UK politics, it's impossible to ignore the absolute disarray that is currently gripping the Labour Party, the blatant hypocrisy of our lawmakers, and the financial sleight of hand being played by the government. As the country's financial woes spiral, its leadership is only making the situation worse. If this isn't the time for a political overhaul, I don't know when is. We have a Labour Party tearing itself apart, MPs granting themselves a pay rise while the rest of the country suffers, and the government engaging in economic smoke and mirrors to hide a crippling £200 billion black hole. It's time to wake up, because the system is broken, and those in charge are doing nothing to fix it. First, the spectacle unfolding within the Labour Party is nothing short of catastrophic. Keir Starmer's leadership is at a crossroads, and it's hard to avoid the conclusion that he is failing miserably. Labour's deep internal conflict is not a mere disagreement, it's a civil war. At the heart of this crisis are the party's welfare cuts, a policy Starmer is pushing in an effort to balance the books. What's shocking here is not just the cruelty of this decision, but the sheer hypocrisy behind it. Labour, traditionally the party of the working class, is now willing to throw vulnerable citizens under the bus just to keep the right-wing press off its back. This isn't leadership, this is cowardice. Starmer's tactics have angered many within his own party, with MPs now rebelling over plans to slash benefits that serve the most vulnerable in society. Labour MPs who entered Parliament on promises of a fairer, kinder approach to governance are now finding themselves on the wrong side of history, trapped between their own conscience and their party's leadership. But let's be clear, this is no time for soft measures. The truth is that the numbers do not support these cuts, and even the most desperate economic policy would find better alternatives than kicking the poor when they are already down. The UK's welfare budget might be nearing the Tory cap, but we're talking about a measly overshoot of £8.6 billion. When you're dealing with government spending that runs into the hundreds of billions, this is pocket change. The solution is not to punish those already struggling, but to look at bigger spending inefficiencies that don't harm the most vulnerable. And yet here we are, with Labour at war with itself, on the brink of alienating the very people who could have delivered the votes they desperately need to win the next election. If Labour does not find a clear identity soon, they will forfeit their relevance. But the disillusionment doesn't stop at Labour's infighting. Let's turn to the issue of MPs' pay rises, an insult of the highest order. While millions of Brits are facing rising inflation, stagnant wages, and deepening poverty, MPs have decided that it's time for a pay bump. This is not just a slap in the face, it's a declaration of contempt for the working class. MPs are set to pocket an additional £2,500 in their salaries in April, bringing their earnings to nearly £94,000 a year. And they are doing this while the government preaches austerity and fiscal discipline. This is the epitome of hypocrisy. When the poorest are being told to tighten their belts, when public services are being decimated, these so-called public servants are making sure they don't feel the pinch. The justification? MPs have a tough job, so they deserve more money. But let's put this in perspective. Teachers, nurses, and other key workers have been crying out for a pay rise for years, only to be told there's no money. But for MPs, there's always money. The fact that the pay rise is above inflation makes it even worse. This is not about fairness. This is about self-preservation for an elite political class completely out of touch with the real struggles of ordinary people. Finally, we come to the government's financial manipulation. The UK is teetering on the edge of an economic disaster, and the government's response? A game of smoke and mirrors. Rachel Reeves, the shadow chancellor, has been busy pretending that the country's finances aren't in freefall. She continues to peddle the lie that the UK's debt is manageable, but the reality is much darker. There is a £200 billion black hole in the UK's accounts, and no amount of creative accounting can make it disappear. The government is cleverly shifting debt around to make it look like things aren't as bad as they are. But just like when you hide debt in your personal finances, it doesn't go away, it accumulates. And when the bill eventually comes due, it won't be the politicians with their cushy salaries or the bankers pulling the strings who will suffer. It will be ordinary people, forced to shoulder the consequences of financial mismanagement that was never adequately addressed. It's time to be honest about the state of this country. The government is failing, Labour is lost, and MPs are more concerned with fattening their paychecks than addressing the pressing issues of the day. The economic crisis isn't just on the horizon, it's here. The reckoning is coming, and it will not be pretty. Politicians can't continue pretending everything is fine while their constituents drown in debt and despair. At some point, the truth will catch up with them. When it does, the people who will be left to pick up the pieces won't be the political elite. It will be the working class who have been failed at every turn. If we want change, it's time to hold these politicians accountable. The time for complacency is over. The time for action is now.